Victoria Sterling adjusted her navy blazer as she walked through the pristine marble lobby of Wellington Dynamics. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. At 28, she was the youngest senior financial analyst in the company's history. Today she carried a report that could save the corporation millions of dollars. The elevator whisked her up to the 40th floor, where the executive offices overlooked the bustling city below. Victoria had spent 3 sleepless nights preparing her analysis of the proposed merger with Blackstone Industries. Every number, every projection, every risk assessment pointed to the same conclusion. This deal would be a disaster. James Wellington sat behind his mahogany desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. At 42, he was the golden boy CEO who had inherited Wellington Dynamics from his father and expanded it into a billion-dollar empire. His blue eyes held the confidence of a man who had never been wrong about anything important. "Victoria, right on time," James said, barely looking up from his computer screen. "I hope you have good news about the Blackstone merger. The board is eager to move forward." Victoria placed her thick report on his desk. "Mr. Wellington, I need you to read this carefully. My analysis shows significant problems with the Blackstone acquisition." James glanced at the report's cover page and frowned. "Problems? Victoria, this merger will make us the largest player in the Pacific Northwest. Blackstone has assets worth over $200 million. Sir, those assets are overvalued by at least 30%, Victoria said, opening to the first page of detailed financial breakdowns. Their debt-to-equity ratio is dangerous, and their cash flow projections are based on unrealistic market assumptions. James leaned back in his leather chair, his expression shifting from mild interest to irritation. "Victoria, I've been in this business for 20 years. I know a good deal when I see one." "Mr. Wellington, please look at page 15, Victoria insisted, her voice steady despite the growing tension. Blackstone's revenue streams are heavily dependent on 3 major clients. 2 of those clients are already considering contract cancellations. Where did you get this information?" James demanded. "I contacted industry sources and reviewed public filings. Everything is documented and verified," Victoria replied. "Sir, if we proceed with this merger, we could lose between $40 and $60 million within the first year." James stood up abruptly, his face flushing red. "Victoria, I think you're overstepping your bounds here. The merger has already been approved by our legal team and our senior advisors." "But have they seen these financial projections?" Victoria asked, flipping to another section of her report. "Have they analyzed the regional market trends that showed declining demand for Blackstone's primary services?" "Enough," James snapped. "Victoria, I appreciate your thoroughness, but sometimes you need to trust experience over spreadsheets. This merger is happening." Victoria felt her heart sink, but she pressed on. "Mr. Wellington, I'm begging you to reconsider. Give me 1 week to present this to the full board. Let them see the numbers before you sign anything." James walked to his window, staring out at the city's skyline. "Victoria, you're a talented analyst, but you lack vision. You see numbers where I see opportunities. Blackstone Industries has infrastructure we need, connections we want, and market presence we can leverage. All of that means nothing if the company is hemorrhaging money," Victoria said quietly. "Sir, my job is to protect Wellington Dynamics from financial risks. This merger represents the biggest risk I've ever seen." James turned back to face her, his expression cold. "Your job, Victoria, is to provide analysis when requested and support company decisions when they're made. The Blackstone merger is a done deal." 3 months later, Victoria's worst predictions came true. Blackstone Industries collapsed spectacularly, taking $47 million of Wellington Dynamics money with it. The 2 major clients Victoria had warned about canceled their contracts within weeks of the merger. Hidden debts surfaced. Equipment was worthless. Entire divisions had to be shut down. The board demanded answers. Investors threatened lawsuits. The media circled like vultures, hungry for the story of how Wellington Dynamics had made such a catastrophic business decision. James Wellington faced the biggest crisis of his career, and he made a choice that would haunt him for years to come.
Ladies,
And gentlemen, James announced to the packed boardroom, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. After a thorough investigation, we've discovered that the Blackstone merger was recommended by our senior financial analyst, Victoria Sterling. Victoria, sitting in the back row, felt the blood drain from her face. Mr. Wellington, that's not true. I specifically recommended against the merger. Unfortunately, James continued, Miss Sterling's analysis contained several critical errors. That led to our decision to proceed. We've discovered discrepancies in her projections and concerns about her methodology. The room erupted in whispers. Victoria stood up, her voice shaking with disbelief. That's a complete lie. I have copies of my original report. I warned against this merger repeatedly. James's assistant handed out altered documents to the board members. Victoria watched in horror as her carefully crafted analysis was twisted into a recommendation for the disastrous merger. Numbers had been changed, conclusions rewritten, and her signature forged on documents she had never seen. Miss Sterling, James said with false sympathy, your services are no longer required. At Wellington Dynamics, security escorted Victoria from the building within the hour. Her access cards were deactivated, her computer wiped, her office cleared. Within days, news of her failed analysis spread throughout the industry. No financial firm would hire her. Her reputation was destroyed. The legal battle lasted 6 months. Victoria's lawyers fought against Wellington Dynamics' team of expensive attorneys. But without access to internal documents or company records, proving her innocence became impossible. In the end, she was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from ever telling her side of the story. Victoria left the city with nothing but her savings and a burning determination to rebuild her life. She moved across the country, changed her approach to business consulting, and spent the next 5 years building Phoenix Strategic Solutions into the most respected crisis management firm in the nation. She specialized in saving companies that others had given up on. Her success rate was legendary. CEOs who had lost everything called her the miracle worker. But Victoria never forgot the lesson James Wellington had taught her. Sometimes brilliant analysis wasn't enough. Sometimes you needed power to make. People listen now, 5 years later, as Victoria Sterling sat in her corner office overlooking a different city skyline. Her assistant knocked on the door. Miss Sterling, there's a call for you. Wellington Dynamics wants to schedule a consultation. They say it's urgent. Victoria smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. After 5 years of patient planning, James Wellington had finally made enough mistakes to need her help, and this time, she would be the one setting the terms. The boardroom at Wellington Dynamics felt smaller than Victoria remembered. The same mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that had witnessed countless corporate decisions. But now the atmosphere was heavy with desperation. Instead of the arrogant confidence she recalled from 5 years ago, Victoria entered wearing a charcoal gray suit that commanded attention without demanding it. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional style that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her brown eyes. She carried a slim leather portfolio that contained either salvation or destruction for the company that had once destroyed her. 8 board members sat around the table, their faces grave with the weight of impending financial collapse. At the head of the table sat Robert Wellington, James's uncle and the current board chairman. His silver mustache twitched nervously as Victoria took her seat. Miss Sterling, Robert began, his voice formal but respectful, thank you for coming. Phoenix Strategic Solutions comes highly recommended for situations like ours. Situations like yours are my specialty, Mr. Wellington, Victoria replied, opening her portfolio with deliberate precision. Companies that have made critical strategic errors and now face bankruptcy typically require aggressive intervention.
Ow.
Board member Patricia Hayes leaned forward. Our financial advisors suggest we have perhaps 6 months before we're forced to declare bankruptcy. Can Phoenix Strategic Solutions work within that time frame? It depends entirely on your willingness to accept necessary changes, Victoria said, clicking open her laptop. The screen displayed a devastating financial analysis that made several board members wince. Wellington Dynamics has lost $68 million over the past 18 months. Your debt service obligations exceed your monthly revenue by 30%. Thomas Bradley, the company's longest-serving board member, cleared his throat. Miss Sterling, we understand the situation is serious. What we need to know is whether you believe the company can be saved. Victoria's expression remained professionally neutral, but inside she felt a surge of satisfaction. These were the same people who had sat silently while James Wellington destroyed her career. Now they needed her expertise to survive. Gentlemen, ladies, Wellington Dynamics can absolutely be saved, she said, advancing to the next slide. However, my analysis indicates that current leadership has created a pattern of poor decision-making that must be addressed before any restructuring can succeed. What kind of poor decision-making? Patricia asked. The Blackstone merger was? Just the beginning, Victoria replied, her voice steady despite the personal history behind those words. Over the past 5 years, this company has made 7 major strategic decisions. 5 of them were financially disastrous. 3 of them directly contradicted basic market analysis. The boardroom door opened, and Victoria's breath caught despite 5 years of preparation for this moment. James Wellington entered with the same confident stride she remembered, though his dark hair now showed gray at the temples, and his blue eyes carried shadows that hadn't been there before, or an expensive navy suit that couldn't quite hide the stress lines around his eyes or the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his coffee cup. When his gaze found hers across the room, the cup slipped from his fingers, shattering against the polished floor. "Hello, James," Victoria said quietly. The color drained from his face. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to save your company," she replied, gesturing to the scattered board members. Phoenix Strategic Solutions was hired because Wellington Dynamics is failing at an alarming rate. They called me because I specialize in exactly this type of crisis intervention. Robert Wellington looked between them with growing confusion. "You two know each other?" "Miss Sterling used to work here," James managed, his composure slowly returning, though his voice remained strained. "Several years ago, used to work here," Victoria repeated, allowing a slight edge to enter her professional tone. "That's an interesting way to describe systematically destroying someone's career to cover your own mistakes." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing undercurrents they didn't fully understand. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," James said quickly. "Actually, I think transparency is exactly what this company needs," Victoria replied, turning back to her presentation. 5 years ago, I was a senior analyst here. Presented. Comprehensive analysis recommending against the Blackstone Industries merger. James's face went pale again. "Victoria, please don't do this." The CEO ignored my recommendations. She continued as if he hadn't spoken. "When the merger failed exactly as I predicted, costing the company $47 million, I was blamed for the disaster. Documents were altered to suggest I had recommended the acquisition that I had actually fought against." Patricia Hayes leaned forward, her expression troubled. "Are you saying our records from that time are inaccurate?" "I'm saying that your CEO chose to destroy my career rather than accept responsibility for his own poor judgment," Victoria said, her eyes never leaving James's face. "And the same decision-making patterns that led to that crisis are exactly what's driving your current problems." Thomas Bradley raised his hand. "Miss Sterling, what exactly are you proposing we do?" Victoria clicked to her next slide, showing a detailed recovery plan. "I can save Wellington Dynamics. My projections show a clear path to profitability within 14 months with full recovery possible within 3 years." "What would that require?" Robert asked. "Complete restructuring of executive decision-making processes, implementation of data-driven strategic planning. Most importantly, absolute commitment from leadership to follow expert recommendations instead of making emotional choices about company direction." James straightened in his chair. "And you think I'm incapable of that commitment?" "I think you've demonstrated a consistent pattern of choosing personal image over corporate welfare," Victoria replied calmly. "The question is whether that pattern can change." She closed her laptop and faced the room. "Gentlemen, ladies, I can save Wellington Dynamics, but I won't waste my time or your money on a hopeless effort. "What are your conditions?" Patricia asked. Victoria's smile was professionally polite and personally sharp. Complete operational authority during the restructuring period. All strategic decisions must be approved by Phoenix Strategic Solutions before implementation. And one additional requirement that ensures investor confidence during the transition? What kind of additional requirement? Robert pressed. Market research shows that companies in crisis recovery have significantly better success rates when investors perceive stable, committed leadership, Victoria explained, clicking to a slide showing industry statistics. Recent corporate scandals have made investors extremely sensitive to any signs of leadership instability. James was staring at her with growing horror, beginning to understand where this was heading. Specifically, Victoria continued, institutional. Investors demonstrate much higher confidence in companies led by executives with strong personal commitments. Market analysis indicates that married executives are perceived as more reliable and forward-thinking. The silence in the room was deafening. "Are you suggesting," Thomas said slowly, "that our CEO's marital status affects investor confidence?" "I'm stating a documented market reality," Victoria replied. Companies recovering from financial crisis require access to bridge financing during restructuring. Conservative estimates suggest you'll need $20 to $25 million in interim capital. She moved closer to the table. "My condition for taking Wellington Dynamics as a client is a 5-year executive stability contract that provides absolute assurance to investors of unified leadership and long-term commitment." "What kind of stability contract?" Patricia asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "A marriage contract," Victoria said quietly. "Between myself and Mr. Wellington." The explosion of voices was immediate. Board members spoke over each other in shock and disbelief. Only James remained silent, his face cycling through emotions Victoria couldn't quite read. "This is unprecedented," Robert sputtered. "It's also effective," Victoria countered. "Adah!" Announcement of executive marriage typically results in immediate investor confidence increase of 15 to 20%. Combined with a solid restructuring plan, it virtually guarantees access to bridge financing. She gathered her materials efficiently. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I'll be accepting an offer from Meridian Corporation for a competing project." As she reached the door, Victoria turned back to face the room. "Gentlemen, you called me because you needed someone who could make difficult decisions and implement unpopular solutions. This is what that looks like." Her gaze found James across the room. "The question is whether you trust me enough to let me save what you couldn't." The door closed behind her, leaving 8 stunned board members and 1 shattered. CEO to contemplate the most unusual business proposal in Wellington Dynamics history. The law offices of Sterling and Associates occupied the top floor of the financial district's most prestigious building. Victoria had chosen the location deliberately when she'd hired them to draft the most unusual contract of her career. In the morning, sunlight streamed through floor-tootling windows as she reviewed the final documents one last time. James Wellington sat across from her at the polished conference table, looking like a man preparing for major surgery. The past 48 hours had aged him visibly. His usually perfect appearance showed subtle signs of sleepless nights, and his blue eyes held the weary expression of someone who had learned not to trust his own judgment. Attorney Rebecca Morrison entered with 2 thick folders and the efficient manner of someone who had spent 20 years negotiating corporate agreements. "Miss Sterling, Mr. Wellington, everything is prepared for your signatures." "The consulting agreement first," Victoria said, opening the first folder. 18-month engagement, performance-based compensation, complete operational authority for restructuring implementation. James read slowly, pausing at several sections. The terms made his subordinate position official. For the next 18 months, Victoria Sterling would have more authority over Wellington Dynamics than its own CEO. "Standard terms for this type of crisis intervention," Rebecca explained. "Miss Sterling will have final approval on all strategic decisions, budget allocations, and personnel changes." Victoria signed with confident strokes. James hesitated for a moment, then added his signature. officially placing his company's fate in the hands of the woman whose career he had destroyed. Now, for the more unusual arrangement, Rebecca said, opening the second folder. The marriage contract is unprecedented in my experience, but legally sound. Victoria had spent weeks crafting these terms. 5-year duration, renewable by mutual consent, specific obligations for public appearances and investor relations activities. Separate residences with provision for shared housing if required for credibility. Clearly defined financial arrangements keeping personal assets separate. While sharing household expenses for public functions, either party can terminate with 6 months' notice, provided company performance metrics have been achieved, Rebecca continued. There's also a clause allowing for contract renegotiation after the first year based on changed circumstances. James looked up. I'd like to add something. Both women turned to him in surprise. A provision stating that all public statements and media appearances must be coordinated between both parties. No surprises, no unilateral decisions that could damage either person's reputation. Victoria considered this. It was a reasonable protection for both of them, acceptable provided any media coordination doesn't interfere with business restructuring. Activities? Rebecca made the addition by hand. Both parties initialed the change. Then came the moment that would change everything. Victoria signed. Her name with the same steady confidence she brought to every professional decision. James signed more slowly, his signature carrying the weight of someone surrendering control of both his company and his personal life. Congratulations, Rebecca said with slight bewilderment. You're now legally married and bound by a comprehensive business partnership agreement. They were married, completely officially married, despite never having shared anything more intimate than professional conflicts and mutual career destruction. What happens now? James asked quietly. Now we make this arrangement work, Victoria replied, gathering her copies of the contracts. I've scheduled a press conference for this afternoon. Business media will want the restructuring story, and will need to handle questions about our relationship carefully. You've already scheduled a press conference? James, I've been planning this project for 5 years. Every detail has been considered. She checked her phone for messages. My assistant has prepared press materials highlighting both the business restructuring and our professional relationship that developed into a personal partnership. Professional relationship that developed into personal partnership, he repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it? It's accurate and manages public perception effectively, Victoria said. The business press needs a narrative they can understand and investors can trust. James was beginning to grasp the scope of what he had committed to. What else have you planned? Engagement photos for the financial magazines? Dinner reservations at Cascade tonight for our first public appearance as a couple. Your assistant has been coordinated with mine to adjust your schedule. For the next month, how many public appearances? At least 6 in the first month to establish credibility with investors, Victoria explained. The marriage announcement needs to feel authentic and stable to be effective. She moved toward the door, then paused. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear the charcoal suit with the silver tie? Photographs better than the navy? How do you know what suits I own? I've been studying Wellington dynamics and its leadership for 5 years. James, I know your wardrobe, your schedule, your business habits, and your decision-making patterns. The difference now is that I'm using that knowledge to save your company. Instead of planning, it's restructuring from the outside. The press conference that afternoon went exactly as Victoria had orchestrated. The business media focused on Phoenix strategic solutions, impressive track record, and the comprehensive restructuring plan. Questions about the marriage were handled with practiced professionalism. Miss Sterling, how did your professional relationship with Mr. Wellington develop into a personal one? Asked a reporter from Financial Weekly. Victoria smiled warmly, her hand finding James's arm in a gesture that appeared completely natural. Working closely with someone you respect professionally often leads to deeper connections. Discovered we share similar values about building sustainable businesses and supporting employees through difficult transitions. James, following her lead, added, Victoria's expertise and insight have been invaluable. When you find someone who challenges you to be better both professionally and personally, you don't let that opportunity slip away. The cameras captured what appeared to be genuine affection between two successful executives who had found love through business partnership. That evening at Cascade Restaurant, Victoria and James sat at a corner table where they could be seen, but not easily overheard. The soft lighting cast a romantic glow over their first official date, though both were acutely aware this was entirely performance. "You're very good at this," James said quietly, cutting his salmon while maintaining the appearance of intimate conversation. "At what? Acting like you don't despise me?" Victoria paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "I don't despise you, James." He looked surprised. "After what I did to you?" "I was angry for a long time," she admitted, keeping her voice low and her expression pleasant for any observers. "But anger is exhausting. What you did was wrong, but it also led me to build something better than I ever could have achieved at Wellington Dynamics. So this is all just business to you?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "This is justice. Not revenge, but balance. You destroyed my career to save your reputation. I'm saving your company to restore mine. And after 5 years, when the contract expires, we'll evaluate whether the arrangement still serves both our interests." James was quiet for a moment, processing this. "You really think we can make this work? Pretending to be married while restructuring a failing company?" "I think we can accomplish whatever we commit to accomplishing," Victoria replied. "The question is whether you're genuinely committed to following expert recommendations this time, or whether your pride will interfere with sound business decisions." "My pride has already cost me everything that matters," James said quietly. "My company is failing, my reputation is damaged, and I'm married to someone who has every right to hate me. I think my pride is the least of my concerns now." Victoria studied his face in the soft restaurant lighting. She had expected arrogance, defensiveness, or attempts at manipulation. Instead, she found what appeared to be genuine humility and determination. "Then, we might actually succeed," she said as they left the restaurant. Photographers captured images of the newlywed executives walking hand in hand toward their car. The pictures would appear in tomorrow's business section, providing exactly the kind of stable, committed leadership image that would reassure nervous investors. Victoria Sterling Wellington, as she would now be known professionally, had spent 5 years planning this moment. James Wellington had spent 5 years making the mistakes that led to his desperate need for her expertise. Now they were partners in the most complex business arrangement either had ever attempted. Success would restore both their reputations and save hundreds of jobs. Failure would destroy them both completely, as James held the car door open for his new wife. He wondered if he was about to experience the best decision or the biggest mistake of his professional life. Victoria settled into the passenger seat, already planning their next public appearance. After 5 years of patient preparation, the real work was just beginning.